Hello, thank you for joining us. I'm Sharon Kelleher, and I am the director of the Flint Memorial Library in North Reading. Our program tonight is a collaboration with the Massachusetts Public Libraries and Haley Booksellers. Our facilitator this evening is Hank Phillippi Ryan. Hank is the USA Today bestselling author of 13 novels of suspense. She has also won multiple prestigious awards for her crime fiction, including 5 Agathas, 4 Anthonys, and the coveted Mary Higgins Clark Award. She's also the on-air investigative reporter for Boston's WHDH-TV and has won 37 Emmys, 14 Edward R. Murrow Awards, and dozens of other honors for her groundbreaking journalism. National book reviews have called Hank a master at crafting suspenseful mysteries and a superb and gifted storyteller. Her newest book is The First to Lie, a chilling psychological standalone. It is now nominated for the Anthony Award for Best Novel and the iconic Mary Higgins Clark Award. Watch for Her Perfect Life coming in September, which received starred reviews from Kirkus and Publishers Weekly, which called it a superlative thriller. There you go. Beautiful. So thank you. And now our featured author, we are so thrilled to have you here. Kate White is the New York Times best-selling author of 15 novels of suspense, 7 standalone psychological thrillers, including the just-released The Fiancée, as well as 8 Bailey Weggins mysteries. For 14 years, Kate served as the editor-in-chief of Cosmopolitan magazine, and though she loved the job and all the freebies to be found in the Cosmo beauty closet, which I love, she decided to leave 8 years ago to concentrate full-time on being a suspense author. Her first mystery, Even If It Kills Her, was a Kelly Ripa book club pick and #1 bestseller on Amazon. Her most recent Bailey Weggins mystery, Such a Perfect Wife, was nominated for an International Thrillers Writers Award. In addition to writing mysteries and thrillers, Kate is the author of several best-selling career books, including The Gutsy Girl Handbook, Your Manifesto for Success, as well as I Shouldn't Be Telling You This, How to Ask for Money, Snag the Promotion, and Create the Career You Deserve. She divides her time now between New York City and Las Flores, Uruguay. Thank you both so much for being here tonight to share your time and your stories with us.
Thank you, Sharon. It's really fabulous to be here, and it's always wonderful to see you, Kate. Let me just say to you all here this evening, we're all experiencing bizarre internet transmission. So if you see us freezing or being slow or fluttering or whatever, you know, this is libraries during the pandemic. So we'll all go with the flow here. So if I go away because of whatever, Kate will just take over. If Kate goes away because of whatever, I'll take over till the other one comes back, and we will be fine. So we're aware, and thank you so much for putting up with that. Kate, congratulations.
Oh, thank you, Hank. Thank you.
It's just been, I mean, if I say selling like hotcakes, am I allowed to use such a cliche? But it is. Are you thrilled?
It's just been out not quite 2 weeks. And so my publisher's happy. And as long as they're happy, you're just relieved, because just as I know from my magazine days, those early numbers, if they're soft, everyone gets kind of a droopy look on their face.
Yes, and you have not experienced that with The Fiancée or any of the other of your books that your fans just crave. I mean, you are an auto-buy author for me, and I know for so many of the wonderful people who are here tonight. I see Shirley and Roz and Katie and Jay and Pat and Sue, and it's wonderful, Ruth, to see you all here tonight. So let's talk about The Fiancée a little bit. I'll start, and then you tell whatever more you want to tell. Talk about a thriller. Stars a woman named Summer, who with her husband is on the way to an annual family gathering at the family's gorgeous estate. Now that much I feel safe saying. But what else can we tell this huge group about the plot of the story?
Well, it's a little bit different for me in that it's a kind of locked room or country house mystery, in that everything takes place in the same location, this estate. And every year the family gathers for a week's vacation in July. In fact, I think this may be one of the only times where a book I wrote came out at the exact month that is occurring in the book. And so they're used to having a good time. It's four sons with their parents. Their parents are in their early 70s, and then their three wives, and then this newcomer who is the youngest son's girlfriend, and there she is, Hannah, and she's going to be his fiance. And Summer, who's the protagonist, really doesn't like her. She doesn't trust her. And so right away, the ecosystem's affected. And then someone in the family dies. And what makes it a little different than other locked room mysteries is that usually in that kind of suspense novel, when someone's been killed, everyone panics and they wonder if they're going to be next. But in this case, only Summer realizes that it's probably not death, but by natural causes, that it's a murder, and she has a hard time convincing anybody else of what's going on.
So, I mean, this is one of the things that's such a genius about this book, is that initially everybody's sad, but only Summer is terrified.
Right. And because she's a struggling actress who's very successful doing voiceover work, but that's not really what she wants to be doing. She says, if I have to spend the rest of my life recording things like, please listen carefully because our menu options have changed, she'll shoot herself. But Hannah's a successful actress, and she's just shooting a Netflix show. And so there's a competitiveness that Summer has a hard time even acknowledging. But her husband, Gabe, as soon as Summer comes to him and says, I don't like Hannah, I think there's something going on here, he worries that she's just experiencing twinges of envy for Hannah. And so all this affects her ability to make her case, for Summer to make her case, because she's trying to figure out the truth at the same time she's trying to convince Gabe that that something's not right.
I mean, it is interesting because every woman has felt an intuition about someone else, and every woman has felt, forgive me, you men who are here tonight. When I look this way, I'm looking at the comment. Forgive me, you men who are here tonight, but every woman has been told, you're silly, it doesn't mean anything. And we say, we're going with our gut here. And they say, no, you're just jealous, or fill in some other inappropriate emotion. And you deal with that so beautifully here.
Yeah, no, you're so right, Hank. That's so true. And look, we have both worked in other fields as we have written our suspense novels. And we know that from the other fields we've been in too. And I think, for Summer, it's because she's suspicious of Hannah right away. It's her gut, but also she's attuned to a few things that she sees going on that she might have not been attuned to if she hadn't been suspicious of Hannah to begin with.
Exactly. And that kind of prism then that she sees the world through changes what happens along the way. And it's so fascinating that you made her an actor, because she has to behave a certain way. And Hannah's an actor, and she knows that. And she knows that it would be easy enough for Hannah to behave a certain way. So there's a lot of subtext and a lot of depth and a lot of people saying things that have double and triple meanings, which is so much fun to read. Was it fun to write that?
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I had really been interested in the idea of setting a mystery within a family, because though a lot of my books involve couples, I'd never done a family, and I was just interested in what happens when the ecosystem gets disturbed by somebody new coming into it. And of course, what happens then too is it's disturbed by the secrets that Summer begins to discover as she tries to look beneath the surface and see, was there really a murder? She finds out things about her in-laws and her relatives through marriage that she didn't know. And
it's great. It's great because Summer is sort of newish to the family as well. And in a family, as you talk about the family ecosystem, which is so fascinating, because everybody has a history. and everybody has a place in the family, you know, and there's the smart one, and there's the lazy one, and there's the ambitious one, and there's the obsequious one. I'm making this up, but you have them in, you know, the roles in your own book. And somebody who's new into that system has to learn the history of how each of them has dealt with each other, you know, ever for their entire lives.
Yeah, it just was fun for me to do because it was a little bit new. You know, as you mentioned that Summer's an actress, you and I have both borrowed from our careers, and in her perfect life, it's about TV journalism. And have you found, you know, just like I have sometimes, that you want to get out of that a little bit, but it just feels good to have the authenticity of writing about what you know. Because, I mean, when I read your books, and there's they a lot of them have dealt with broadcast journalism or journalism, and I just know when I'm reading them, she didn't just do a little bit of research. They are legitimate. And a couple of times I've read books, suspense novels, that involve magazine journalists, and it hasn't been accurate. And so it's the safe thing for me sometimes has been to write about what I know. And the only way I went into writing about acting, you know, someone who was an actor, is my husband was in broadcast journalism. And after 9/11, he decided, you know, he would love to finally move away from that. And he'd had a double major in college and done theater and acting too. So he started doing theater in New York. So I felt like I could at least make her an actress and have it be, you know, rely on everything I knew from him doing it for a number of years, and feel like I could be pretty close to having a level of verisimilitude with it, at least.
I mean, it's wonderful that you can draw on your husband's experience. My husband is a criminal defense attorney, as you know, and we talk every day about what would a judge do, what would a lawyer do, what would a detective do, what's the law. It's really good to have in-house counsel.
Yeah, I was thinking that I know that your husband is. I've read, and someone also told me he wasn't just a famous, fabulous attorney, but really good looking too. And,
he looks like Donald Sutherland, so then you can sort of go from there.
Wow,
You
wow,
think
that's winning.
And I think I knew your husband before I knew you, as a matter of fact, which is
he
pretty
did
strange.
anchor the news in Boston when he was younger, but I felt like, boy, that's really an advantage for you, right? To be able at night to say to Jonathan, okay, I'm covering this. What would happen here? I mean, do you really use him like as a big resource?
Kate, yes, I do. I completely do. And I promise you all, we'll get back to the Fiancée in 1 second. But I do have to say that every day when I'm writing about 3 o'clock, I don't know why it turns out to be that way, I'll call my husband and say, "Sweetheart, it's me with the legal question of the day." And then, so I couldn't do this without him. But
can I just say, by the way, I just had lunch today. I took her to lunch with this fabulous attorney I use. I'm not married to her, but she became a friend. She lived on my block in New York, and though we've moved, but she's a really high-powered defense attorney in New York, and she has been so good about giving me information. And it was so nice because today I picked up the tab, and she goes, "Okay, you don't have to do that. I love it. It's fun for me to have you interview me." And I thought, oh, that's good, because I'm going to use you for every freaking book. And
what are you doing tomorrow, sister?
$900 an hour or something, but I get her for free and like an occasional lunch.
Sounds good. Sounds like a good deal. You know, someone in the Pat in the chat and Mina Jane, my darling Mina, is saying he is handsome. She's met him, but Pat is, and I forgot that people would know your husband. We're in Boston, you know, we're in New England. So can you tell us his name? Is that okay?
No, I can't, because he would probably be like, "Kate, do not leave me out of it." But he had moved to New York to anchor, and that's when I met him. And I was in the magazine business still at that point. And a friend of mine who I won the Glamour magazine Top 10 College Woman contest was filling in for Donna Hanover, who was Rudy Giuliani's wife at the time, who he everyone knows is well documented that he cheated on her, but she was on maternity leave, and this woman who anchored was filling in as a part-time anchor with him. She and I were very close from having won the contest, and that day she calls me. She goes, "When you tune in tonight, I'm going to be sitting next to the man of your dreams." And so I met him through my friend Sheila, and I will be eternally grateful for that. Though what happened is she shows him something about me, and she says, you gotta call Kate White. I'd really like to set it up. And he's known her for like 10 minutes, so he doesn't call. So I finally said to her, "Do you want me to, do you mind if I took matters into my own hands?" And we were doing a story on the most eligible men in America, so I called him up. I was so nervous, and I said, "We'd love to have you in the story." And then he felt kind of obligated to.
Well, that's hilarious in every way. I have never heard that story. It is brilliant. It is hilarious. It shows you, Kate White, totally. It also shows, how wonderful is it to be able to say to a person that you'd like to go out with, "I'm going to make you famous." Well, how about that? I'm going to make you famous.
Well,
want to do that?
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is, I was so nervous. I actually my voice was like, "Hi, I know Sheila suggested we get together, but, I was actually calling for another reason." But then by the time the article came out about the most eligible men in America, he was no longer eligible.
Oh, that is a wonderful story.
Yeah.
What does he, I know this is a point of view question, so we're going to make it be sort of literary. In a point of view question, how does he tell the story?
He would say exactly the same.
Yeah.
And I think that he has a lot of fun, that's how we met in this kind of crazy way.
Yeah. Well, I was going back to that's a great story. And I do want to hear about, did you say Glamour Top 10 College? What was that called? Because
it was the Glamour magazine Top 10 College Woman contest. And I was such a nerdy kid in high school. I know I've heard you talk about being a nerd, and I was a nerd too. I was yearbook editor and a few things, but I never had dates. I was just kind of a bit of a loner. And then I got to college, and I got contact lenses, and I tried to reinvent myself. And I went to a college that had just gone co-ed after almost 200 years, and so they picked me to be their candidate in this contest that Glamour magazine had, and it was fantastic contest. And I thought, God, could I possibly win? And you had to write an essay, and the essay was about your goals for the future. And I wanted to win this so much. I thought, what if I do something bold and not what they're asking to do in the essay? And so I wrote about why I had no goals for the future, to be provocative. And I guess that was like one of my first times I learned that if you breaking the rules is really good, it gets you things. And so I won. And I met several women. All the women were great, but some of them are still good friends of mine. And the prize was a trip to England, Scotland, and Wales. And it was just so fabulous. And then 10 years later, Sheila introduced me to my husband. So it was the gift that kept on giving.
Don't you think, first of all, I have two quick things about that. One, all I ever wanted to do in my nerdy high school days and my nerdy college days was to win the Glamour contest. Look at those people who won and think, "Oh, I just want to be that." So I totally get it that you won, and I completely understand the glory of that. Congratulations.
Well, particularly for me, because I was that same girl as this nerdy, dateless girl. I looked at that contest. The girls were always, they went to Barnard or someplace like that, and I just thought, I'm never going to be that girl. But then I literally reinvented myself in college. I figured nobody here knows I was a loser, and I'm just going to act as if I was a winner. And I remember there was this one guy I was dating, and he said to me one day, and I just figured something out. You were never like the homecoming queen type in high school, were you? And, and so I think somehow he'd sort of figured out, hey, I just kind of made this all up. And I mean, I didn't lie, but I meant the idea that I felt comfortable in my skin was just something I started doing and owning after years of not feeling that way, because I figured I'm in this new setting and who's to know. And it was such a great experience for me. And then when the school picked me for the contest, it was really, I think, a big turning point in my life.
Well, it's interesting because I did exactly the same thing. And college is where I became Hank instead of Harriet. And that is sort of emblematic of the whole thing. But I do think, I mean, and you have taken that lesson that you learned, the reinvention and the breaking the rules, and even that if you're pretending to be confident, that you come out confident, and you have taken that to heart for not only your career as the executive editor, is that the correct title, of Cosmopolitan, but in your nonfiction books. You're generous enough and wise enough and caring enough not only to learn that for yourself, but to share that with other people.
Well, for me, I think it was such a big breakthrough to realize that some of the lessons, I know you're a baby boomer because you admit it, like me, and some of the lessons we were taught were, don't jump into a puddle with your party shoes on, don't rock the boat. And as I began to discover that breaking the rules really got you the big prizes, I wrote a book, was close to 25 years ago, Why Good Girls Don't Get Ahead, and it was a bestseller. And I loved sharing with other women the importance of ignoring that kind of advice that, don't jump in the puddle with your party shoes. By all means, jump in the puddle with your party shoes on. Toot your own horn. Don't be afraid to just ask for what you want. That's so critical. And I think a lot of women today know the importance of asking for what they want, but they sometimes talk themselves out of it. They'll say, well, now's not a good time. But you just have to ask. You have to ask. You can't wait for somebody to tap you.
Well, I didn't start writing fiction until I was 55, which was 15 years ago. And I do remember thinking, if I don't do this now, when am I going to do it? And I think it's such a valuable lesson. What's going to happen? You're going to fail. You're not going to fail. Something else will happen to make it work. And I think your whole life, and mine too, has sort of been that way. You sort of never know what wonderful thing is around the next corner.
Yeah, you touched on that. I watched your fabulous TEDx talk a while ago, and I remember you touched on that. I think a lot of us right now are thinking, what are we going to walk away with from the pandemic with, besides a lot of blue masks that hopefully we won't always have to wear again? But, a lot of people apparently are thinking about reinventing themselves. And I say go for it, because I made a decision to reinvent. You've kept your broadcast job. You've tweaked it slightly, right? But exactly. For me, I started writing suspense while I was at Cosmo, and it was a little bit like burning the candle at both ends, but I wanted a backup plan in case I got fired, which happens in magazines. And I also wanted to just be able to make sure I got around to something I dreamed about and I hadn't done yet. And then I decided, once I had enough under my belt, that I could leave. And it's really exhilarating when you do reinvent, when you have the boldness to go for it and not be afraid of the unknown a bit. I was thinking the other day, there was a movie theater in my town that they had a vending machine, and there was like juicy fruits and Good and Plenty and Junior Mints and Milk Duds and some of those things you used to be able to get. And there was a category at the very end where it was a question mark. And it wasn't, I think, official. It's just the guy who ran, or woman who ran the movie theater had taken a piece of paper and put a question mark. And so if you put your money in and pulled that lever, you didn't know what was coming. It was going to be one of the other 4 or 5 things, but you didn't know. And I used to wonder, who picks the question mark? What person is nervy enough to say, you know what, today I think I'm going to surprise myself?
Did you ever do it?
No, never. But the big lesson in life is sometimes it's just so exhilarating to pick the question mark.
Just pull that lever.
So anyone who,
that's what I was going to ask you. That's what I was going to ask you exactly. So you have this wonderful career in magazines, and you always wanted to write. And there's a moment where you thought, all right, I'm not going to let go of this rung of the jungle gym quite yet, but I'm going to reach over to this rung of another jungle gym. But what was, I mean, that's a big leap, because writing a novel is a completely different experience. What made you have the confidence to think, you know, yeah, I could do that? I mean, did you know how to do that?
Well, it's funny because I remember from your TEDx talk, you talked a little bit about it too. You something gave you a fabulous idea, and then you thought, hey, I can write this in a novel. And your husband said to you, wait, why did you think you could write a novel? I'm sure he said it nicely. And, you know, for me, though, when I was younger and was growing up, that's the first thing I wanted to do, write novels. And you've mentioned in the past how much you love Nancy Drew, like I do. And so I wanted to write suspense fiction, but I also wanted to work for magazines and newspapers and do different things. And once I won the Glamour Contest and it opened a door into magazines, I left that other stuff behind. And I just didn't want to ever fully give up on it. I wanted to see if there was a way later in life I could tick off that box. And I think right now is a time where many people are wondering, there is a box I wanted to tick off. And it's really exciting to try it. And you can test the waters, like you and I tested the waters by doing it while we had a day job. And it is burning the candle at both ends, but at least then you get the security of knowing, yeah, I can do this. I can make it work.
It's talking about suspense, though. You were talking about loving suspense, Nancy Drew and Sherlock Holmes and Agatha Christie and those things, those wonderful mysteries that we read that led us into that world of mystery and puzzles and kind of staying one step ahead of the reader, which I know we both love that.
Right.
In psychological suspense, like you write, in domestic suspense, like you write, especially, I mean, in all its glory in The Fiancée, those mind games and that gaslighting is so much a part of it. You know, the psychological suspense mind games, sometimes we play the games on ourselves and we cause ourselves to believe something. How do you think about suspense, especially when it comes to The Fiancée? How do you think about how you do it? There's a lot of sleight of hand that goes into suspense.
Well, it's funny, speaking of sleight of hand, I really found it very helpful I not only read books on magic, but I interviewed a magician once, and it helped me understand a little bit about misdirection and the whole idea of magic. This one fabulous female magician told me is often the magician has done the trick before you even think he's doing the trick, or she's doing the trick, or it's occurring at a different time than you think. And so I try to use a little bit of that in suspense. I think just the idea of trying to, well, I always know the ending, and I know you've said, and I assume it wasn't the case in Her Perfect Life. You like to just have the story evolve, right, as you're writing. I always know the ending. I know who the killer is, and I know why they killed. And then I have a very rough idea, and then I plot out like 4 chapters at a time, which is really different than the way you do it, right?
Well, sometimes I don't have an outline, and I do not know the end. I never know the end, and it's always a surprise to me. But sometimes when I'm writing sort of just as it happens, I'm sort of like running the news as it happens. Sometimes I'll think, oh, this has to happen, then this has to happen, then this has to happen, then this has to happen. And I'll just write that down real fast because that's a logical progression. And it gives me some sort of a net to write with rather than having no net at all. Does that net that you have of knowing the end, first of all, does the end ever change as the story progresses?
Never. And I only realized that the other day. Somebody asked me that, and I realized, no, I've never changed from what my initial concept was. Now, certainly different things happen. Like I remember I was working on a book once, and there was this one character that I all of a sudden realized he was going to die, and I thought, oh no, I like him. I did not know he was going to die. But the very end is always, I'm steadfast about that. And I think what I enjoy about that or helps me is then it makes it easier to do the misdirection because you know who you're going to be misdirecting it from. One question I had about for you, just I've been meaning to ask you because what I love, there are 3 female character points of view in this basically, and they've all got secrets. So I'm not really sure who to totally trust with all of them. But what was that like? I've never done that. What was it like to write 3 different character points of view?
Well, when my book comes out, I will talk about that. When my book comes out, you and I will talk again. We'll invite you to come back and talk to exactly these people, and we can have exactly the conversation because I would love to talk about that. And it's exciting. It's method acting, just as you were talking about earlier, actually. I become the characters that I'm writing about. So I see the world through Lily's eyes when I'm writing Lily, and I see the world through Greer's eyes in her mind when I'm writing Greer, and I become Cassie when I'm Cassie. And wow. I'm sure my posture is different. Cassie is a little, and Lily is perfect, you think, and Greer's sort of, we don't know. And you get that attitude, and you decide, and this is what I was going to ask you about. What I do decide is what they want. What does the character want? Mm-hmm. And that's what your characters, every single character in the Fiancée wants something. And they're going there. It's a question of how far they'll go to get what that is. And that's what sort of drives this story so beautifully. Did you think of it that way?
I try to think of that, though sometimes that crystallizes as I'm writing, and that's part of the magic of writing. And you almost have to just relax, kind of like the person who picks the candy that just has a question mark. With the idea, if you just stay with it and trust yourself and go with the flow, things will emerge as you're writing. And some of my characterization I do as I'm writing, but I also think it's good. One tip I once heard someone say is, every character should have a secret. And it may not even be a secret that you ever tell the reader, but and it helps you as you try on that character and do the kind of method acting you're talking about. I'd love to know if your husband's ever walked in, not recognizing me.
That would be a funny moment.
He doesn't know Lily.
That would be a funny moment. And Katie is saying too, and I think this is exactly what you're speaking to. And Gail is saying, I should have read you this earlier. Gail is saying, no one can read your mind. So yes, you have to ask. And that's interesting too. People say, I wish you would have told me. Right. And isn't it sort of interesting for your book as well? Sometimes people are withholding and they protect things. Right. When if they would just say, tell me the thing.
That's interesting because I was saying that the asking thing about in relation to women in their lives having to ask is important. And Gail's right. People can't read your mind. And as a boss, I didn't always know what people wanted. And I tried to be attuned to it. But you have to raise your hand. But it's also true, I think, with characters. Mm-hmm. You have to start to really think about what they want, what's motivating them, what's driving them. And that gives a lot of the energy and drama to your story. And if you don't know it, you can get stuck. And
yes.
I do find that sometimes if I'm not sure what's going to happen next exactly, it's because I haven't always thought out that stuff thoroughly yet.
And so what do you do in those situations on the days where you're, sitting at the computer and you think, okay, I've got to write my 2,000 words or my 1,000 words or whatever you've selected for the day, and your brain is just sort of saying, I have no idea. Please tell me you have those days, first of all.
Oh, yes. But I think, and this is something that I found very true that I learned from magazines that helps with fiction. In magazines, you never have writer's block. If you're lacking something, a thought or an idea, you have to restock the pond. You have to think about, okay, I've got to bring more in here. And so sometimes if I feel stuck, what I'll do is more research. I'll call up some of the wonderful people like the lawyer I mentioned just a little while ago, forensic people or cops, and just start talking to them, or even I'll just go online. And then also I always, though I write on a laptop, I keep a spiral notebook for each book. And a great tip somebody told me once in general about creativity was, you put the question out to the universe. Yes. And it's not that something weird happens, but that you prime your subconscious to spark on something you see. So I might write, why doesn't she open the door? Why doesn't she know what the answer is? And then what happens is that all of a sudden you're looking across your room and you see a throw pillow, and all of a sudden that throw pillow starts sparking some idea, like maybe I'll kill her by smothering her with a throw pillow.
No, 100%. I'm going through this my notebook that I have for each book.
You have a spiral notebook.
It'll that's exactly what I do. Of course, I can't find the right page that has the question, but you can see that it's just, it's just scrawled.
Oh, gosh,
and it will say like, why wouldn't she open the door? Why wouldn't she open the door? I just write everything.
I wish I could go grab mine because it's so close to that, Hank. It is very similar.
Because that's weird, isn't it, that we work so similarly? And I don't make my mind, I don't filter it. I just write down every possible thing that it could possibly be. And it just gets your mind going. It just gets your mind going. The other thing I do sometimes is to say to myself, as if there'd be somebody else to say it to, I say to myself, what would someone really do? What would someone really do when this happens? Because this is a real person we're talking about, a real fictional person. What would their actual reaction be? And sometimes that makes a difference.
I think that's such a good point, because once in a while I get caught up in the structure and I have to come back to what would Bailey really do in that moment? What would Jack do? And get inside that character, as opposed to being caught up in the structure that you're
Exactly. Although, talking about structure, and something that really struck me about this book, that I just want to read 2 lines. And it begins with a prologue, which has one tone and one sort of sensibility, which is, the first thing that seems wrong to her is the vultures. Now that is so scary and so so dark and so sinister. And then when you open to chapter 1, you start with this: the day couldn't be more gorgeous. And see how instantly that's dark and light, that's conflict, that's back and forth, that's mystery, that's something bad happened, but it started out so wonderfully. Did you consciously make that contrast?
Yes, because look, and everyone who's joined us, and I'm sure they read suspense, they love suspense. We know now that today, because our attention spans are different, you got to hook somebody right from the start. You mentioned Sherlock Holmes and how much you'd read that when you were younger. Things took a while to get started. Even 10 years ago, 15 years ago, you got to hook someone not just with the first chapter, first page, but even with the first sentence. But I wanted for me, it was important because this is about setting this bucolic estate. And so I wanted to have that be very important part of the opening, but then it sounds a little pretty. In fact, Joe Finder sent me an email saying he'd read The Fiancée, the fabulous Joe Finder, and he said, Kate, you brought a little Jane Austen into that book, because there's stuff about food, there's stuff about decor, there's stuff about landscape. But I wanted to add the prologue to sort of jump ahead to something in the middle of the book that's grisly and that involves a corpse and something as ugly as vultures pecking at it. And I felt then I'd have the contrast of those two things, and that could be appealing, I hope, because I hope my reader likes a corpse being pecked at by vultures.
Well, the vultures, the vultures in this gorgeous estate. And let's talk about that, because that's on. I really wanted to ask you about this place that the family goes every year, which is just as gorgeous and real money glamorous, comfortable, beautiful, expansive gardens, places to eat outside, delicious food, flowers, all kinds of flowers, and helpers and luxury, but not we hate you kind of luxury, but just comfortable, happy luxury. Talk a little bit about that. Is that a real place?
Well, we have a home in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, weekend home, like some New Yorkers have to get away from the city. And so what I did was just took our place and put it on steroids and imagined it as an estate, and just went to town. And then I did something, and we both do this, we're researchers, but I wanted the matriarch, Claire, to be a landscape designer. And I had to research some really great landscape design. And I discovered that there's a whole story in the New York Times about Vogue editor Anna Wintour's landscape design for her home on Long Island. And they not only write about it and show a video, but they included a blueprint of it. So I spent a lot of time looking at that and kind of let it inspire me a bit. So Anna Wintour probably doesn't read my books and will never notice, and wouldn't even if she did, wouldn't see the similarity. But it was really fun for me to be able to do that.
Unless she's here tonight somehow, or that somebody
I don't think so.
her.
Let me see. Do we see her here? No.
No, she wouldn't use her real name. She wouldn't use her real name. She'd be in sunglasses in the chat. Right. So we would never know. That's very glamorous. And what a good idea that was. Well, I mean, the setting, you really take us there in the book. I mean, we've all smelled the fragrance of the flowers like that, and the barbecuing outside, and the smell of gin and tonics in the summer, and all that. It's great. It's just great. Was it fun for you to talk about? I mean, there's a lot of food. I have to say, I was starving as I was reading this book, because the descriptions of the food, which are so seamlessly put in, and that's a challenge as well, were really fun to read. Talk about writing about food a little bit.
Well, I always have a fair amount of food because I love to eat, and partly how I ended up as the editor of the Mystery Writers of America Cookbook was because somebody on the committee said, oh, Kate White always includes food in her books. Now, sometimes one mistake I made, and in fact, I see Gail had asked, do you have someone who gets a first read? And I do use a reader. And one of the things she said to me early on was, Kate, your characters drink way too much coffee. They're never going to sleep. So I do have food, and I have a lot of coffee drinking, but not as much as I used to put in there.
That's so funny, because what seems like a lot of coffee to some people seems like regular day to us, right? That's what you would do.
Right. I'm a big coffee, tea, espresso, cappuccino, just plenty of caffeine.
Yes, I am too. And I know in your newsletters, and you should all go to Kate's website and sign up for her newsletter. Your newsletters have these wonderful, very easy, gorgeous recipes in them.
Well, it's katewhite.com if anyone wants it. And I'm not a great cook, but I follow recipes, and my husband really likes it likes me to cook, and my kids too. They're young adults now, but they have their favorites. I'm not good in the kitchen, but I try. And so that's why any recipe I show in my newsletter is just something really simple that I discovered from the Silver Palette or the Barefoot Contessa or the New York Times. And if it has more than 9 ingredients, I'm probably not making it.
That's great. Well, I really enjoyed that affluence in the Fiancée, and a really wonderful, chilling, surprising thriller. I think one of the things I admire about you so much is how aware you are of the balance in your life, of taking time for yourself in a peaceful way, of figuring out when you work and when you do something fun and when you you've really worked on this, haven't you? Have you always been like that?
Well, I think for the great thing about being women today is that we live long lives. And if we're lucky, we do get a chance after if we've had kids afterwards, to get back to doing some things for ourselves. And when my kids were younger and I worked, I really did not do much for myself. And what I tried to do were things that I thought my kids would enjoy too. Like my son, I sort of suspected that he seemed really interested in birds. And so I encouraged him to do bird watching and fell in love with it myself. So I had a hobby, but it was a hobby that I did with him. And then the beauty of leaving Cosmo for me, as much as I loved my job, the choosing to leave was finally, I am going to have some time in a day where I can really have some time for myself. And it sort of corresponded with my kids leaving college. And it's really been pretty delicious for me to be able to get up in the morning and meditate and just read the freaking paper, something I didn't always have time to do. So I think anyone, again, who's just thinking about what do I want to be post-pandemic, I think that's a great thing to think about adding to the mix, that time for yourself. And it doesn't always have to be as much as we think it does. Sometimes just a half an hour a day is really restorative.
And has the pandemic and your work-life balance, how has that affected your writing?
Well, what's been tricky for me, because I did have a job that really allowed me to be the sort of extrovert side of my personality, to be out there, because I loved my staff and I loved the outgoing part of it. But I'm an introvert too, and so it wasn't that hard to say I'm going to work in a little dark office. And my office is, have always been dark, kind of womb-like. But I used to be able to get out there and see people on my staff who I'm so close to, see people from my old company. And I haven't had that during the pandemic. So even though I had a lot of time to write, which I liked, I've missed so much, like so many of us, the interacting with people. And that was a very important part for me of becoming a full-time novelist, that it wouldn't just be dark office. It would also be lunching, and that's just coming back for me now.
I know. When you said earlier that you went out to lunch with a friend, I thought, oh, she went out to lunch with a friend. I remember that. I wanted just to make sure that we've gotten all the questions, because the questions are pouring in, and I'm so riveted to what you're saying that I'm hoping that I haven't missed them. Gail says she was lucky enough to meet you at Union College when you were visiting. She was just as nice in person, Gail says.
Wow, Gail.
That's really lovely. So are you just crazy on book tour now for the Fiancée? Do you have lots of events? Are you still going strong?
Well, I've had a lot of virtual events, as you know, like with Her Perfect Life for September. Is everything going to be virtual that you do? Because I hear that's just going to keep going, that until the end of the year, it's got to be virtual.
Well, I can reveal to you all, just the hundreds of us here this evening, that I think what I'm going to do, now that you asked Kate for the launch of the first of Her Perfect Life, is have an online event. I'm just going to, hold on a second, I'm taking a screenshot. Okay, thank you. I think I'll have an online event, so all of you who don't live in the New England area can be with me to launch Her Perfect Life. And then I think I'm going to have an open house at a bookstore where people can just come by and say hello and not have to be in a standing room only room for an hour listening to me yammer for an hour, but just come say hi, have a glass of Prosecco, get a signed book, see your pals if you want to, anytime between 6 and 8. Do you think that'll work?
I think people are really eager to get out. They really are. So I think, yeah, it will work.
We'll see what happens. Well, you're all invited. You're all invited. And it's making me realize, I'm looking through the question. And Roz is asking very quickly, it was career day back in the 80s, says Gail. And final question, Roz is saying, how long does it take you to write a book?
Well, I'm on a year contract, which I assume you are too, a yearly. So it's got to be a year. And the tricky part is when you're finishing one book, and I need more than a year. I need a few months to think about it. So while I'm finishing a book, I'm always coming up with the idea for the next one. And that's the tricky part, that I need probably 15 months to write a book. So there's a little bit window where I'm doing two at the same time, one mostly thinking and the other finishing up. But hey, it's doable, as you know, that it's just, you make yourself do it. Suspense readers like authors to come up with a book every year. So you just have to kind of go that way.
And really the only thing worse than having to write a book a year is not having to. I sort of count
exactly.
Right? I sort of count my blessings every day.
Right,
And the days that I think this is too hard, how am I going to get done? And I think, yes, I get to do this. I get to do this. This is what I've always wanted to do. H, who's this is probably Anna Wintour, is asking if we outfit coordinated.
I mentioned that in the green room, that we're so similar, but I think when you've got a bookcase behind you, you don't want to be too busy with the patterns. So I've been doing a lot of black. And this is from my Cosmo days. Used to get great gifts from designers at Christmas time, but sometimes they would be something that clearly hadn't sold in the store. And I once got this orange Chanel bag, and it's sort of like, I'm just never going to wear and use an orange bag. But this was from Armani, and I cherish it. It was just their Christmas gift one year. And so this is sort of my go-to necklace when I'm wearing black.
And I love it. I love how the clasp lays so nicely on your shoulder. That's beautiful. And the person who asked about color coordinated outfits was your daughter, Kate, was your daughter, Haley.
Oh my gosh, how did she know?
Here.
She is a very clever, fabulous daughter. And so she had just texted me right before I came on, and I said, honey, look, I've got to jump on to an event, so I'll read your text later. So look at what that little detective did. She figured it out. Yeah. And Haley, she's so great, with the book that I'm just handed in there. The editor had wanted me to do something towards the end that I just could not figure out. So last weekend I brainstormed with Haley, and she helped me come up with the fabulous solution. So she's very creative, and I'm just so grateful she helped me dig myself out of that hole.
Two fast things, and then we'll close. One is, can I get Haley's email? Because I might need her help from time to time. And that would be, it's never, two minds are better than one. Yeah. And Gail is saying, as you were alluding to what your plot problem on your new book, I know we want to talk about the Fiancée, and all of you need to, no pressure, it's just Kate's career. Please. Your Fiancée at your local bookstore, independent bookstore, or anywhere your little heart desires, or the library. I know Haley Books has copies of The Fiancée, and Haley Books, Dick Haley, the bookseller who has kept us all going through the pandemic. Check with him, and there'll be check with the chat, and there'll be a link. Please do go out and buy The Fiancée. That said, or take it out from the library and tell your friends. And if you love it, just give it a review. I was on the board of the Lyric Stage Company of Boston. I'll tell you this quickly. On the board of the Lyric Stage Company of Boston, and our producing artistic director used to come out at the beginning of every performance and say, if you like our show, tell your friends.
Yeah.
If you don't say anything.
Yeah, that's right.
Which I really love.
Yeah.
But Kate, congratulations. Oh, I was going to ask you. So the next book, can you tell us anything?
Oh, just quickly, it's about a woman whose first husband has been murdered, and she remarries not too soon, not too long after that. And she begins to, over time, fear that her second husband may have been aware of her before and possibly killed her first husband, even though she hasn't met him until afterwards. So that's it. And, Hank, thank you so much for doing this. I'm so grateful you mentioned Haley Booksellers, and they coordinated this with those fabulous Massachusetts libraries. And I'm just so appreciative, and I'm such a big fan of yours. And I remember us meeting years and years ago at a mystery conference in Connecticut, right? It was in Connecticut.
Yes. Oh, yes. Was it Murder 203? I think it was called.
And so I feel so lucky to have gotten to know you over time and just feel you're a pal. And I'm so grateful for you interviewing me tonight.
Well, my complete pleasure. As I know you could all tell, I am a fan of yours forever. Back from Glamour magazine days, I probably saw you. I probably saw you on the cover. Congratulations on this marvelous, twisty, wonderful book. Oh, I'm taking a picture of this right now.
And Hank, I loved Her Perfect Life. I was lucky enough to have an advanced copy, and it's so complex, so interesting, really amazing twists, lots of secrets, and I know people, when it comes out in September, are just going to love it, and great starred reviews as well.
Thank you. Oh, yes. Thank you. From Publishers Weekly and Kirkus. And I am hoping that this is being recorded, because I'm just going to put what you said on a loop. I'm going to play it over and not on social media, just in my study. I'm just going to play it to myself every day. Kate, you are fabulous. I love that you named your daughter after Haley Booksellers. That's really a really wonderful tribute. You all, thank you for coming so much. Thank you for sharing this evening with Kate and with me. Please check out The Fiancée. As you can see, it is gorgeous and a wonderful, perfect summer read, or actually any season of the year. And thank you all for being with us.
And
tonight.
thank you to all you readers from me as well.
And we will see you next time. Take care. Stay safe.